welcome to this exciting video where you once again join me in the wild landscape of Scotland. And for today's adventure, we've once again come back to document another incredible piece of World War II history. And once again with this adventure, it's another piece of abandoned RAF history, because in today's video I've come to the old abandoned RAF Fordoun Airfield, and it's a bit further north from last week's adventures when we were at RAF Teeling, a wee bit further south. So yeah, this is interesting. There's loads of little abandoned buildings. Over here there's two old remains of hangars, but I think the farmer used it for storage and stuff after the war and in the later years, and then nowadays it's proper rotted and fallen down. But the first building I'm about to have a look at is this little one here, and I believe this may have actually been fuel storage in this area here at the airfield, and this is super interesting to see. When I was at the Teeling airfield there was no sign of any of this type of building left, so it's cool to see this out here in the wild lands of Fordoun. And it is cool to document these buildings before they're fully degraded and gone forever. And I can actually see this one's still got quite a lot of the original roof on it. I was here one time with the channel DJ, I think it was either the start of last year or a couple of years ago, but it's often cool to come back and find history that I missed the last time, and often document details of buildings that I never saw. But once again, it's raining here when I've arrived, because last time I came here the weather was terrible as well. But look at this first little building. It is super windy today, and I do apologise if there's any wind in the audio. It's just some extreme Scottish weather. And look at this, you can see the typical RAF construction with a red brick, and then they had this cement veneer that they used to put over. And yeah, this must have been the door. It's had a light or some sort of system or sign even mounted up there. And this is where I believe they would have had generators or some sort of pumps mounted on these massive cement plinths here. It's so interesting to see the size of this, and this would have been a little industrial building here at the airfield. And you can see these look like they've been two identical pumps or whatever, and there's other interesting holes leading out through the walls. And sometimes these airfields had fuel storage. Maybe it could have been a potential system where one of these pumps was bringing the fuel into the site here, and then the other pump would have been pumping it throughout the site. So it is interesting to theorise of that history. And look, on the roof here on the metal frame there's actually evidence. I don't know how well that comes out on the camera. That's where the wire had probably been draped over the roof. It's little wire clamps. And this is the original roof that they used to put on a lot of the buildings. In last week's videos I was at an RAF shooting range, and this is the very same type of roof material they would have had back then. And it's cool to see some of it still up on the roof. Obviously windy days and stormy nights, this stuff falls down and degrades. These videos can often be the last thing keeping the history alive. Oh, that is interesting. Look at this, folks. Look, the grate's still on there. So that shows that it wasn't a pipe that was leading out there, it was just a ventilation duct. So it was likely to have been the same with these other lower down holes. I can see the brickwork starting to open up here as well. There's a big gap now between it and the rest of the lintel stone up there. This is just insane. Look at the weathering on these. The cement's lasting a lot longer than the bricks. That can often be the frosty, cold weather that does that to these buildings. You have to imagine how thin these bricks are, that the more years that pass, they're just disappearing. Look, here's more remains of the door hinges right here. It's just mad to think the amount of little RAF bases and RAF airfields that were around Scotland and the whole of Great Britain. It's just amazing to document the final details of these they played such a crucial part in the war effort of Great Britain. Look at that there. And the RAF played such a heroic part in the Battle of Britain, obviously, and incredible wartime events like that. All these little airfields were playing like a crucial key part in all that, the defence of the country. And then one day, once the war was over and victorious, these places were no longer needed, and the history has just lay here, abandoned and forgotten. And it is mad just to see the condition of this now. This is another interesting point here, folks. I believe this may have been where they had some sort of tank. I was theorising they were pumping the fuel, obviously, to this area. And this is obviously a mound here, but you can see the stone wall leading along there. And it looks like it leads right along, and I'm not sure if this had been a building here with a roof, with potentially like tanks here under the centre area. There is unusual like sticks and things, but this is obviously a farm area, and sometimes the farmer would have been using these buildings after the war. Sometimes these areas can have changed at that time. I'll just go around the perimeter of this, because you can see here how there's a big mound, and the bricks is quite far like within that. Not unless the ground had been levelled and changed at this side, and maybe some of it had been just pushed up here at the end of the war. Yeah, I just love to see this. Look at this little building here. It's actually still got the old cement road out the front of it. Yeah, this is so cool, folks. I'd forgotten how many little buildings and nuggets of history was in this area. And look, this one's also got this wall here. A lot of these buildings were constructed so that if there was a blast or a detonation of a bomb, the blast wouldn't go into the building. Right, folks, shout out the farmer there that actually owns this land. I really appreciate you coming over, and they were just seeing what I was doing over here on this land, and I can appreciate that, because obviously farmers and stuff here, a lot of people like poking about, trying to steal things off, but I was just explaining how I'm documenting the abandoned history of Scotland with this World War II building here. And the interesting thing with this building in this area here, I just found out 100% here for sure. This used to be the fuel storage area here with the pumping shed, and like, to clarify that history is so incredible, because often I come to these areas and theorise the history, and it shows that it just lines up accurately, and it's just amazing to see. I'm absolutely mind blown with buildings like this. Look, this one's also had a plinth here, and the bolt pattern looks the same as that other shed that we saw. And because this is a fuel storage area or pumping area, look, this is the reason there's so many holes and vents on the walls. It's to prevent it from exploding. Because it's obviously aircraft fuel that we're dealing with here. And look, there's even a vent up on the roof. But look at the cool thing. The 4 pipe clamps is still here on the structure. Wow. I've just noticed there's some water on the lens here, folks. I'll give that a clean. Here's another interesting detail of this construction, folks. We've seen a lot of different reinforcement and rebar through the cement over the years. But look, this one's got this twisted wire. Twisted wire rebar. You can see the roof's not thick like some of the bunkers or air raid shelters, but that's because if this took a direct hit, it's pretty much going to blow. Okay, no matter how thick the roof is, there's so much probably volatile gases and stuff. Look, there's the original cornerstone of this like front blast wall protection area. And look, it's had the same doors mounted in there. I'm not sure if that was the door frame mounted there, or if it has had 2 doors. Kind of what I'm thinking. It's probably been steel doors. And then there's been something else mounted here. Potentially a light, or maybe a sign. Maybe a warning sign, like no naked flames or no smoking in this area, which must have been a real threat at that time. See that there, that's, I don't know if that's a bit of farming history or a piece of like World War II history, but often at these sites the two things can be mixed up. Sometimes it's hard to decipher the two different time frames. Look, there's one last remaining piece of the cement render, and that shows this whole buildings here were originally that grey colour. And look, here's another detail. It's had that bitumen coating on the roof. So that shows these buildings were all grey in colour with the black roof. And the airfields would have had a different character back at that time. These internal roads would have been the cement, and then the runways would have been black. And look at this, the building roof here. I believe there's been a lot scrapped here from these buildings after the war, including the pipes, and this area has been ripped out as the pipes and tanks were taken away. And I think that's the reason the doors is fully gone. This area here must have had like metal doors, and then this has been like a wall in here. They've had a proper blast wall, I think, around them, maybe even a light roof made of similar material to that. Wow, this is so cool, folks. Look at that as well. I'm not sure what it's been. Could be farming history, or it could be World War II history. And I'm obviously being cautious these places where I walk. Sometimes at old airfields there can be deep holes or like old drains. You never know. Sometimes there was massive pits dug for sanitation, like we saw at the Isla Airfield on the wild Isle of Isla, folks. Look at this here. That's the outside of the vent. Just think about the soldiers or the engineers that built these buildings. Early days of the war, most likely 1940, 1941. And like back then, the outcome of the war was unknown. Britain was on the threshold of invasion, and they were doing all they could to defend the land from the German invasion. They didn't know if it was coming from air, coming from sea, or coming onto the land by the coast, so they just had to build everything everywhere they could. And when the time came, they were ready. The RAF fought the German Air Force and sent them home. And it's just cool to see skeletons of that history left here. It's just an absolute World War II madness right here, folks. Anyway, let's head on to this next wee building up in the distance. So it was so interesting to meet the farmer when I was over at that building and just speak about the few little World War II things here. She was saying that obviously the air raid shelters and stuff's all just totally gone. When this new infrastructure here was built, looks like some like pipelines or whatever they're making over there. It could even be some offshore company. But when that was obviously built, it just took away what World War II history was there. And then look at this, folks. This is an old like internal road, which must have been like obviously in the airfield. You can imagine the old jeeps or trucks of the day coming up and down here, taking the soldiers, well, the pilots and the fighter pilots from the RAF would have probably been coming down a road like this, going towards the fighter pen, which is where there was massive hangars where the fighter aircraft were obviously prepared and then readied before they taxied out onto the runway. And then who even knows where they would be flying after that, folks. It could be anywhere in the defence of the country. Here's a detail of the history, folks. Look at that in the cement, the way it's got these ridges. That was on purpose. They did that obviously for grip. And I've seen that also last week when we were down at RAF Teeling and other such interesting airfields like that. It's just crazy to see how they had the standard construction. And it's just incredible to think how so many of these places are gone and just about deleted off the face of the earth. All that history and all that work that was put in at that time, it's just almost gone and forgotten. It's just crazy to explore it and imagine that as I walk around. You can just imagine the Hurricanes or the Spitfires sitting down here, the noise of the engines sitting ticking over or firing up. This is the main road here on the left hand side. It would take you from like Aberdeen to Dundee, and that's like the main dual carriageway. That's the highway, as the American viewers would call it. A scene like this is absolutely incredible, folks. When I approach it on foot, I imagine how it originally looked, with the massive hangars here, similar to the two that's down there. Not unless those two that's down there were the ones that used to stand here. That's almost how it may be, because there must have been two hangars here, I believe, and this is what would have been known as the fighter pen. And I think this is the area where the fighter aircraft would have been parked, ready to go, and then the two hangars here would have been where they maintained and prepared the planes for flight, fueled them up and fill them with ammo. Look at this, this is so cool. This is where, look, they used to tie the planes down here. You can imagine these two tying points into the ground, and it's cool to see these ones here where they originally stood, next to the fighter pen, because when I was at RAF Teeling, I was seeing these things lying in the long grass upside down, and I was saying this is for tying the plane to. So to see them here, it's just so special. And look, there's three of them, so you can imagine how the plane would have been tied, most likely facing this angle here. And just think, if there's a row of planes there tied, how it must have looked. It's just an incredible scene of World War II here. And just look at that, that's like the bunker part of the fighter pen right there, where workers of the airfield who were in this area would have run there in the case of an air attack on the base. But also, they may have just also like had that as part of this like little complex here, the fighter pen complex. And like, you can just imagine the hangars here in this area, and there's a door leading from that little bunker area out into this. And I'm not sure, like, I think there would have been just two hangars like side by side. It is interesting to see though, the way it's constructed here. So many years has passed, folks, since the war. It's just mad to try and imagine it how it originally was. It looks like there's been a dog agility class going on in this area as well at one time. There's some little obstacles and stuff like that. And look at this, here's this I believe would have been inside the hangar right now where I'm standing. So you can see the perfect concrete floor that at one time would have had the people walking about. People of the RAF. Imagine the discussions that must have been going on here, like the repairs to the plane, and like things they would have been speaking about to do with the mechanics of the plane back then, trying to get as many planes in working order as quick as they could often. Yeah, it's just crazy now, folks. We're just seeing a scar of that history. Look at this, here's an interesting detail. Look, this piece here is tarred. And I believe that would be original tar, which shows this must have been maybe as far as the front of the hangar came. This is an unusual bit, because I think this area here is tarred. It's got that asphalt coating on it. This is another thing I say, so many years has passed since these places were in their prime. It's like peeling back the layers of history, seeing what's under the ground or under the grass like that. I think it would have been concrete on the internal area. And then, like, after the war, a lot of stuff would have just been gotten rid of as well. If the buildings weren't any use for, like, the current farming, these farmers all wanted their original land back. The more acres they can farm in these places, the more profit they'll make. So a lot of the World War II stuff got pushed to the side or demolished, and you can totally understand why. At the start of World War II, like, these places were just taken off the landowners originally. Their perfect land they had was just taken, and then obviously the RAF moved in and constructed these massive sites. And this is cool because this must have been the original, like, entrance, I believe. There would have been this one entrance, and you can imagine the two hangars at that side. One hangar, I believe, would have been in the area where we saw those metal straps for tying down the airplane, and then this would have been the main door in. You can imagine the two hangars at the far side of here, and this would have been the access. You can even imagine the soldiers like running in here to get their plane. Wow, let's head on in. It's a crazy jungle-like environment here, and each one of these bunkers is just dripping with water, or each one of these buildings I should say. Obviously electricity would have been run all over this site originally, and you can imagine this, you would have had to open a door here to come in, and then this would have been into one of the hangars. So I think the reason it's hard to determine where the two hangars were out here is because this has obviously been bulldozed and shifted after the war. You can see the amount of earth. So this has all been changed and landscaped at that certain time. It's just mad to see that. It is blowing my mind once again, folks. This history of World War II. And this must have been just a mad little area here. It's almost like this has had like the separate frame coming to this distance. And look, that pipe there is on the ground. I'll turn on my torch for this one. We'll see what's going on. Look, see, that's an interesting pipe. I'm not sure if that was like a drain or what was even going on with that. And then we've got this wooden part on the roof where it looks like there has been a door frame or something at this side, because look, there's nails in the wall. But also there's been electricity running along here, and probably right out there. At one time this electricity would have been going right into the hangar, and this may have been where the electrical wires were coming up the wall. That's what that nail may be. That's what I believe that is, folks. That's where the power or electricity was coming into this site. And then look, you can see how the wires have been leading on through. Back at World War II there would have been a wooden door frame on here as well, and you can see where it was fixed on. Some of these bunkers at other airfields do still have that wooden door in position, and it's mad to see, but it's like these ones have been stripped, or some of them has been taken away. I've not seen many air raid shelters with the door. This is an interesting one, folks. This is one of these prefabricated structures similar to what we saw at Teelan Airfield last week, but the ones at Teelan never had any of this, which is the original electrical clips for the wires. You can see how wet the wood is. The history's just almost disappeared forever. And look, there would have been a glass light shade on there. Nowadays it's the home to some swallows. It's a natural habitat for wildlife nowadays, folks. It's mad how nature can just take back over at a site like this. You can see the water on the walls. That's the reason these places decay and degrade. Big chunks chip off with the frost. And this is interesting because there's like a curve in the wall here. Sometimes the shape of these entryways between here and the shelter area was literally to deflect the blasts, and can also shrapnel. If it had come in, it would have had a hard job getting all the way into the bunker. Wow, this is just amazing, folks. These little buildings of history that I document, it blows my mind. It's often like travelling back in time. You just imagine the people in here, the hustle and bustle and nature of the place. And then one day, it's abandoned and forgotten. And once again, look at this. See, the wire's been coming out here, but look, there's still clips in the wall right there. Which is cool to see. And it shows this whole area, the wiring was coming out this way as well. And it must have been coming out that hole in the ground. This is where the second hangar would have been now, folks. Wow, it's just mad to visualise that history and imagine how it had been. You can see how originally they had poured the cement over the wooden shuttering, and then to take the wood away after it had hardened. These entryways with the brickwork is obviously made to suit the land in the area that the bunker here is built. The air raid shelter, I should say. But the air raid shelter itself is a prefabricated one, which they would just get as many sections as they need. And then these end sections were prefabricated to fit like the standard doorway. But this is honestly one of the coolest World War II buildings that I've been to for a while. And it is amazing to see it left here in the land. Can shout out for leaving it here in the land as well to the farmer. I appreciate history like this that I can come and see and document for people all over the world. And if they see it through the road now, they didn't hate to come over and look, 'cause they've seen it on the video. And it is obviously like private land. I appreciate the farmer letting me have a look at these bits and pieces, but anybody that comes here has to like respect landowners and the goings on of these wild Scottish lands, because obviously it's a main like hustling bustling farming area in this part of Scotland. This World War II history is just forgotten in the middle of it, and it looks like the sun's actually starting to shine. Wow, that's just the kind of scene of history that I love. And the fact that I was able to document this loops of metal on the ground, that used to be at every airfield, and to see them here, it's just amazing. Even when I was at Teelan, such a big airfield, there's just none of that left. That's how it's almost like even more cool seeing this airfield. The red brickwork just with the green of the grass, the years of decay. Obviously in the war, all that bit would have been covered over fully, most likely. Especially the centrepiece, it's still covered up. But they used to keep stuff like that well covered, so from the air it was harder to see what was where. The Germans often didn't even know the magnitude of the RAF. Luckily we had invented the chain home radar by this time, and we could actually see when the Germans were approaching. The German Air Force back then thought Britain had so many more planes than what we had, because every time they came over there was just British RAF shooting them down, taking them out. And yeah, look at that there, eh? Just think about the planes that were strapped to that. And it's cool to see how they were set up like this. I imagine it must have been one loop per front wheel and then one to the back. And here's another detail of the history I've just noticed. Check it out, it's like been another little building here. Yeah, that's so cool to see. There's been another building or some other structure in this area. And like all airfields, there was just little buildings all over the place doing different things. Sometimes there was like decontamination rooms and things, because like gas was a real threat back then, so they had a place they could go and clean up. Like if there was such a like an event occurred, they would come back from a flight even potentially in a sorry state, and there was areas, buildings and places that they would get sorted out. On these airfields they had everything the pilot would need, and everything that they would need for the war effort a lot of the time. But it's amazing how quick a lot of these places were constructed back at the wartime. And it is interesting to see how there appears to be tar in this area. I'm not sure if that was like after the war, or if it was cement where the hangars had been with the tar road around the outside. But most of these internal roads at the old airfields are just cement construction. The old runways, such as like the Teelan airfield and places we've seen like that, and Montrose airfield, they've got the tar coating on the runways. And this place would have most likely had it as well, but the reason they did that was to protect the plane's tyres. When the planes were landing originally directly onto the cement, they found that it was burning and tearing the tyres, and the tyres were blown out. But then when they put the tarry like asphalt coating on, that just cured the problem. So that was how a lot of the runways and airfields, they had that thin layer of like the tarry asphalt. That's a detail almost gone as well from these places, because it chips off with the frosty cold weather. So the cool thing with meeting the farmer there was that she told me that there was no other like air raid shelters or anything left in this area, and it's good to find that out without me having to go and like explore around areas or go on mad adventures over moors to try and have a look. That just saved all that hard work. And you just imagine when you see this cement construction, like the planes maybe taxiing up and down here, and the main runway being over there. Oh, right enough so folks, the farmer actually told me the runway here is like a big curve. And it goes up, and at one time obviously it would have gone right around and then back down. So it was quite a big airfield originally, whereas the ones at like Tailin, they were a big massive straight runway and then another one going across the middle. So often they must have just changed, or like made the runways I should say, to suit the land that they were within. But aye, for sure, Spitfires and stuff would have been taxiing around in areas like this. The noise of the engines back at that time was so loud and ferocious. So I think my favourite thing that I saw this time at this airfield was the fuel pump and fuel storage area. And to find out that was exactly what it was, that was amazing. It's just so cool that those buildings are left and I could see how that actually looks. So if I'm ever at airfields in the future, you can often tell what a building is from seeing one on an adventure like this. So check this out folks, this is another hangar here, and it appears to have had like 3 hangars in this area at least. And after seeing it here, I believe that these have always been in this location because they've got the cement base underneath the foundations. And it looks like an original World War II foundation, but also it looks like there may have been other like hangars in this area. And then another interesting detail here, this is where the electrical substation had been within the airfield, a bit like what I saw at RAF Canal Airfield. Each one of these airfields had their own little electrical substation, which was obviously bringing power to the site, and they would have had a fair bit of power that they needed, and for runway lights and other interesting things like that. Check it out, the old metal door or old metal gate is still on here. World War II gate folks, and obviously, well, I just walked into this barbed wire, World War II barbed wire folks. There's worse things to walk into for sure. Yeah, this is where the electrical substation would have been. And I just thought we'd come and document this since we've explored the rest of the site. It's just interesting to see these final details of the site. And look, this is what they did with the broken glass in the wall. That's obviously to stop people jumping over and getting electrocuted, or even jumping over and sabotaging this site. If it was like a German invasion, they would have stuff like this to stop them climbing over, and then the glass would stop them getting a foot on the wall. But yeah, look, this has been the pipes where the cables have been coming up. So there's been like a control panel or whatever, and then different systems on here. This would have probably been where the main electrical kind of transformer was sitting. And look, there's been another pipe there with the wires going down away from it. And look, there's another pipe with the big thick cables still in it with the lead coating on them. Wow, proper 1940s history right there. And it has just been cool. Yeah, that gate there has stood the test of time. And it's interesting just to see this construction. Yeah, wow, it's super cool folks. I'm just sneaking out below this World War II barbed wire. Wow, it's got me. I think it's so corroded there's no actually any spiky bits left on it hardly. But just think how many days and nights kind of site like this has been degrading. Obviously, like I said earlier in the video, these sites were just given back to the former landowners at the end of the war. You can see where there's been another hangar. It's just been a single hangar I can see. I thought it was 2 originally. But the way this landscape is, it's like there has almost been more here originally in the war. It's super overgrown if I go that way, so I'll go back around this side. This would have probably also originally had the cement veneer on here. Whoa, there's a massive train. The main train track goes up there as well, the East Coast main line. leading from north to south with a tin building like that. I think it was painted black originally, or it was definitely painted, because I could see remains of what must have been paint on there. Look, it's flaking off, folks. Let's document the paint. Looks like black paint, like, or it might have even had that like bitumen coating on it as well, the same as the building roofs. So you can just imagine these buildings in their original form. Just incredible. I think the front of this one's been changed dramatically since the days of the war, but that's what farmers did often for like using it as a shed. And originally it would have had big roller doors that were often, when they were open, they would stick out beyond the curve of the building. But this one's been made with two like telegraph poles, been made more into a shed. But the day must have just come where it was no longer viable to keep maintaining it and looking after it. So maybe once again underfoot here there could potentially be more of those metal loops into the concrete, because it looks like there is still internal roads here. This must have been the original access road here underfoot to all these areas. Obviously there's no point in going poking about, because we can see the hangars, and I just wanted to document the side of that one looks in pretty good condition. So it's amazing to see that last remains of the paint, and that's the kind of detail we love to see on the channel. And that way, if it falls down or gets blown away or even demolished at a certain time, the history is recorded on the video for future generations to see what was done back in the early 40s to defend the country from an enemy which was knocking at the door. And any day, like, real invasion of the country was a threat, and it actually came. And the RAF was one of the main defensive arms of Britain, which played such a crucial role. And these videos recording the airfields just keep that history alive and show what's left of that dramatic time. But that's me just about back at my car, folks, so I'm going to end this World War II history video here. Look at this before I end it, folks. Look, here's a massive chunk of cement that I'm guessing has been moved, but look, it's got one of these loops in the top of it. So that's been taken from a part of this airfield, maybe over here where the farmer was reclaiming his field. But that's what that metal loop has been. It's probably been excellent for him shifting the stone. Yeah, look, this one's got another loop here as well. Wow, that's a crazy little bit of history documented before I leave. Look, this piece of cement has got the three loops close together. And that's different to what we saw up at the other end of the airfield here. So that is crazy to see. Like, it's just mad to think in these big mounds of ground what other little historical details remain. Right, folks, I'm ending this one here. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back soon with the next adventure, wherever I end up going.